how to draw hanging hair on your characters, male edition. Let's get started. The model say, howdy do, partner. First, you gotta find your center point on the head. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna have the hair coming from this point. All you gotta do is start making lines that come from this point, and they all come out in like an umbrella fan shape. Call this the umbrella technique. The lines wrap around the head. You can start making these bigger strands that connect back to the point, okay? Just like that. You're not, remember, these are the shapes you're gonna be using. They're like pointy, I don't know what they look like. They look like, I don't know, toenail clipping. Add some in the back of the head, you know what I mean? Even add some that like are on top of the head that like stick out over here, okay? I like to add some that like come from the center point, you know? Add some on the front of the face. Add some smaller ones that like overlap, but they don't go all the way down. Like they're different sizes, all right? Remember, no matter how many you add, they're gonna all come from that same point. So add some loose, thin strands if you want to throughout the head, you know, stuff like this, you know what I'm saying? He low-key looks like...
Hello? Is Zuko here?
Are you an artist who refuses to learn anatomy? That is understandable. It is difficult. But let me show you why you should learn anatomy. So I sketched this pose yesterday, and I wasn't sure what character I was going to put in for it, so I was just drawing the pose and then going to figure it out later. I ended up deciding to use my character Ona, but she has a much different body type than the one that I sketched. But since I studied anatomy, then I was able to turn this into this, which is more like Ona's body type. So learning anatomy is less about trying to define the rules of how you draw things and more about knowing how anatomy works so you can then manipulate it to your advantage.
Here are 3 ways to hold your pencil in order for a much more comfortable drawing experience. Let's get started. First way is pretty much the standard grip. Basically, when you have your thumb, middle finger, and ring finger making a little hole for your pencil to go through. Probably the most common way to hold a pencil for most artists in the community. Probably the most basic one you do right now. Comfortable, and it really gives your hand much more control when you're drawing. What you don't want to do is to bend your finger like this. It's actually really harmful for your finger, especially for the long term. So make sure you don't do that whenever you're drawing. Next hand position is the overhand grip. It's basically when you hold your pencil underneath your hand, with your thumb, ring finger, and the other 3 on the bottom. I mostly use this hand grip when I'm doing shading on drawings. Also really good for you to get really long strokes that can continue for a long time. The beginning is really hard to use because it's not really something you're used to, but it's a really good tip to keep in mind if you want to get different types of strokes with your pencil. Now the next one is the fist grip. Now this is the one you like to use whenever you want to destroy your artwork because you can't stand how it comes out.
Here's a quick tip for artists if you have trouble finding the exact right color. If you go on Procreate and separate the hues, you'll have an easier time to find the exact right color. That's because when colors are in a composition, it can create an illusion to what the real color actually is. And then you can go back to traditional medias and match the hue. That's how I was able to match the colors for this painting.
Here are 3 tips for you to create interesting characters for your story or comic books. Step 1, using shapes. Shapes are good for all drawing, of course. They're even more impressive when you want to create cool characters for whatever you're trying to create. By using boxes, cylinders, and whatever other shapes you can create to make cool shapes for your characters. Using shapes to create your characters is a great way to create interest in your characters. Also helps others to recognize your character just by one glance. They recognize the shape and they understand the character is being drawn. Also, you can create some pretty funny creatures like this one right here. The next tip is very important. That is exaggerating your poses and proportions of your characters. Exaggeration is basically pushing reality to its limit. Also increasing or decreasing the proportions of characters in human bodies. This is probably the most important tip whenever you want to create cool character designs. Exaggerate eyes, hair, lips, mouths, teeth. Doesn't really matter as long as you push it to the limit. And the last and final tip is clothing. Clothes and weapons also helps with the character process. Just Google or Pinterest for reference.
This method is really useful if you want to break down the anatomy of a hand, but you don't want to just trace over photos. I'll outline my wrist, the meaty part of my palm. I'll draw a line down my thumb and curve it around the middle of my hand. I'll continue the line down the back of the hand so we got full coverage like foundation, and draw a line going down the middle of each finger. We'll take a lap around each of the finger joints. So when we're done, your hand is going to look like this, and it's going to make hand studies so much easier and more flexible with what you want to create. Try it for yourself.
Are your drawings becoming so pixelated they look like they belong in an 80s video game? Try these tips. First, when selecting a canvas size, go with big dimensions. You can simply select the screen size option. Here's my brushstroke on a large canvas, compared with a smaller canvas. Also, when you're resizing your image, select the bilinear option on the bottom, and choose either bilinear or bicubic. This prevents your image from pixelating during resizing. Make sure to follow for more tips and tricks.
Whoosh! I have just finished my 33rd sketchbook. That's right, this sucker is now ready for the shelf and it is time for a new sketchbook and thus a new sketchbook cover. And I wanted to show you guys how I do cool covers like this, so let's get right into it. First, gonna need a sketchbook. Whoosh! I like to use the Arteza 100-page big sketchbooks. Let's call a spade a spade. They basically are like the Moleskine ones. You can use whatever, as long as you can paint on the surface. Now the first thing you're going to want to do is prep your sketchbook for painting. So what I like to do is put some plastic cling wrap around the back. I like to leave the spine open and, this. So basically paint doesn't get where I don't want it to. Then of course have an area set up with something to protect your table. Have some kind of palette, water vessels, brushes, paper towel. And then the first step is to apply some gesso. I highly recommend you do this, otherwise the paint will come off because we're going to be using acrylic paint. Stay tuned for part 2 where I show you how I apply the gesso and paint.
I'm going to show you on my phone because this is super useful for phone art. You need to do 2 things. 1. Draw everywhere at once. 2. Avoid details completely. This is a map of where all the features will be. Then you will know where you want the details. Trust me, line art can be used to divide objects, solidify proportions, but there are many ways to complete a drawing without it. This is just how I do it.
So I'm going to be testing art hacks so that you don't have to waste your time and money on them. Let's get started. This first hack is a little bit questionable, but it's how to make a pencil extender out of a Crayola marker. First, we need to get off the tip. Once you have it out, rinse the tube. Don't throw away this because we'll need it later. Now you're going to want to wrap the bottom of this with tape. And now put it inside the tube. Now let's test it. I think it would work a little bit better if it was smaller, but it overall works. I give this an 8 out of 10. Let's go to the next hack. The next hack is how to make watercolor out of a marker. Start off by putting water in a cup. Depending on how pigmented you want it, depends on how much you put in. Now put these in. And just let them sit until they turn white. Now take these out. And now take your paper and your paintbrush, dip it in a moment of truth. It's surprisingly working. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Like for part 2.
I got you, moonlight, you're my starlight. I need you all night. Come on, dance with me. I'm levitating. You, moonlight, you're my starlight. I need you all night. Come on, dance with me. I'm levitating. I believe that you're for me. I feel it in our energy. I see us written in the stars. We can go wherever, so let's do it now or never, baby. Nothing's ever too far. Glitter in the sky.
Quick art tip. Using reference to fill colors faster. Most people either outline or use the lasso tool to fill flat colors, but it's so much easier to just go to the line art layer and select reference. Draw pan swag.
Use this comic strip filter to learn how to add shadows to your artwork. I'm just now learning how to add shadows to my artwork. You can also see how your shadows look like from different angles.
If you've ever used Crayola, stick around to the end. I recently found out that the washable markers are water soluble. Makes sense, so they can wash out of your clothes, right? You can use these like watercolor markers. Now, you're gonna wanna have watercolor paper. All I do is I put a little bit of the ink down and then I use water to spread out the pigment. In doing this, it allows me to use them like watercolors. The plus side is Crayola are very vibrant. Now allow me to blow your mind. You can create art with anything.
Hey bad bitches! So here's some anatomy tips, So for bodies, I just like to simplify the body into shapes. Like the chest area, it would be a trapezoid, the stomach area would be a rectangle, etc. So after I'm done doing the base, I'm just sketching what the body would look like. Just doing these nude because screw clothes, period. But we love diversity, so we're doing other bodies. So here I was making the base for my chubby people. God, I hope that's not rude, but y'all are baddies too. So now I'm doing the rough sketch of how it would look like. Now let's get on to our skinnies. Just like the others, I made a base with shape. Now I'm doing a sketch for it. Let's doodle some examples for the body types on people. Yo, I'm so professional with this. Oh my gosh. So here are examples. Ooh, and our lanky e-boy. Okay, I hope those like tips helped. Bye.